So you decided to get meat chickens. Well, so did we. And if this is your first time raising meat birds, you might have some questions about what you need to do to be prepared for the birds, what you might expect over the course of time that you have them. We're going to talk about all that. Howdy folks, my name's Reagan, and here on our farm, one of our goals is to grow as much of our family's food as possible. It's not always easy. Things don't always go exactly like we have planned, and there's always a learning curve with things. But this is our second time growing meat chickens, and I want to share some things that we learned last year and then share our week-to-week experiences with you this year, because behind me in our brooder, we've got 40 Cornish cross chickens. Let's go check them out. These Cornish cross chicks hatched out 4 days ago, and it is amazing how much they grow in a short amount of time. At the end of the video, we're going to get a weight on these birds so we can track their growth from week to week to week. And if you've never done this before, you will be blown away by the numbers. If you decide to order birds from a hatchery, here's what's going to happen. The day they hatch, they're going to put them in a box and they are going to ship them from the hatchery to your house. Most of the time, they will be delivered to your local post office where they will call you to come pick up your birds. Now, in our case, for some reason, they don't call us and they just put them in the mail carrier's truck and have them bring them to our house. I don't know why. Sometimes that happens. It might happen to you. A lot of people don't know that when baby chicks hatch, they can survive for a couple of days with no food and no water and live only off of the nutrients that they absorbed through the shell right before they hatched out of the egg. The most critical thing during that time period is heat. And so when you order a box of birds, it's going to be packed full with barely any extra room. So for one, the birds are contained, and two, they can keep each other warm in the box during shipping. Now, some people will tell you that you can expect up to a 10% loss off of some of these birds, and especially with meat chickens, because Cornish cross, they're not exactly what I would call hardy or sturdy, but they do a really good job of converting feed into meat in a short period of time. So originally, we ordered 50 birds from the hatchery. We lost 5 in the first couple of days, and then we lost 6 over the next 2, which is more than what I would like. It's one of those things that I'm not pleased with it, but I mean, sometimes these things happen. The hatchery does have a policy. We were able to get the first 5 refunded because they were within a 48-hour time period after they arrived. The other 6, well, that's just going to be on us. So when the birds come in the box, you want to move them into the brooder and get them under a heat source. But before you do that, it's important that you dip their beaks in whatever water that you're giving them so they know where the water is. Usually at that point, they get their beak in there, they know that it's time, this is where they can go to get water. You have food in there as well, and then they can find their heat source. Some people will use heat lamps. This is our first time using exclusively heat plates. And so, well, the jury's still out on how exactly I feel about that. We've had decent luck with the heat lamps and the heat bulbs. They just use a lot of energy, and they're not entirely safe because they can get really hot and start fires. These use just a little bit of energy, generate just enough heat, kind of like a mama hen would when she fluffs up and the chicks all go underneath her. This is kind of what that simulates. They can go underneath and get warm from above, whereas a heat lamp is more of that radiant style heat. Just a couple different ways to do it. Is there a better way than others? Well, it's more about what's going to work for you and what's going to give your chicks the best chance to survive. Speaking of survival, just to give you a heads up, the one that is crying down here is much smaller than the others, and I don't have high hopes that that one's going to make it either. So we could end up losing a total of 12 chicks. We'll see how that goes. Fingers crossed that we don't, because I hate to lose any more. But like I said, these kind of things, it's part of life on a farm. Now, one other thing that we decided to do here in our brooder was use these reusable brooder panels. We purchased these from Premier One Supplies last year. They are great because you just get a whole bunch of them and you can make whatever enclosure that you need, larger or smaller, based on your birds. Our brooder here is divided in half with a piece of plywood. But that was even just a little too big because we don't want these birds losing their heat source, losing track of where they're supposed to be, and getting in the corner or something, and things don't go well from there because they lose track of their food and their water. So having this kind of keeps them in just a little bit of a smaller area to give them the best chance that they have to stay warm, stay where they're supposed to be. And then as the need arises, we can make that area bigger and bigger. Eventually, we'll take the brooder panels down, and then they'll eventually have full range to this entire, I forget how large this area is. I have a video on it if you want to see me build this. Link in the description and right there in the card too. Now, as far as feed goes, we give our birds a broiler starter blend that comes from a local feed mill. It's formulated from hatch until processing day. You can give them the same feed and just increase the quantity basically from day to day, but certainly from week to week. They just eat more and more and more as they grow and grow and grow. And the feed that we give them, that's what it's made to do. Now, of course, if you don't have a local feed mill that you like to use, whatever farm store is nearby, you can find a feed that you can feed these birds. Consult the hatchery that you're purchasing from and go with their recommendation on a feed blend, but what we use works for us. Now, this is really the dirty side of meat chickens. Whatever goes in has to come out, and if you've never raised Cornish cross birds before, you are going to be shocked at how much of a mess that they make in their enclosure. Now, when they're this little, they don't make that big of a mess that quickly, but by the time they're 3 weeks old, and we move ours out to pasture into a tractor system so that we can move them throughout and they fertilize the grass as they go, if you don't have the ability to do that, they are going to get really messy really quick later on in their later growth stages. So if that's not something that you thought about, definitely keep it in the front of your mind, because these birds are gonna make a mess. I've been watching these birds, and even from the couple of minutes ago I mentioned that chick, that thing has already gone downhill quite a bit, so it's not going to be with us much longer, unfortunately. Loss is something that happens. We don't enjoy it, but it is just part of this life. We want to give these birds the best life that we can while they're here, and you know, when you lose one, it's a bummer, but it's just part of it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and grab the kitchen scale and a Tupperware container. That's the best way that I've found to weigh these birds when they're this size, and as they get bigger, I'll show you how we weigh them then. We'll get a 3 bird average on weight and just, you know, bloop, bloop, bloop. And that way we'll track it. We can keep doing 3. Now, we're not going to be able to weigh the same 3 birds every time without tagging them, like putting a band or something around their foot. There's no way to tell them apart, and in my opinion, it's not worth that, because we're just going to do our best to grab 3, kind of give them the old eyeball test, and do it that way.
£2.2 pounds. 3.1 ounces. 3.0 ounces.
Well, there you have it. Meat chicken season is officially underway. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions about what we're doing, or things that you'd like to know, please put them down in the comments, and maybe we'll address them in a future video. Thank you so much for being here. My name's Reagan. This is the GWP Homestead. We'll see y'all soon.